There's a real mixture of sounds today as I make my walk. It's a bit of an urban walk, actually. Most towns, most cities have areas of green belt or land close by that is sandwiched between, as this is actually where I'm walking today, sandwiched between two towns. You know, you see this wonderful wildlife, wonderful nature, but you know that just across the fence over there's an apartment block or something like that, but I do love it here. So let me make a picture, just an establishing sketchbook image to show where I am today. I've got some sun flare. That's quite nice, actually. It's not perfect, and we are celebrating the imperfect these days. So sun flare coming into the right, f8, 550 shutter speed, 160. Here we go, a sketchbook image to start the day. In England land, we've just had this snap-ish election. And as I talk to you, I've no idea of the result because I'm recording this the day before. And I thought, well, I could record sort of two possible outcomes. But then, no, that didn't feel very authentic, to use the A word. So I'll just have to say I've no idea where we are and who's in charge this morning. I know. You don't either, even though you know the result. Half the world is voting for something or someone this year, aren't they? As my grandma used to say, though, let's not talk politics, dear. Would you like another slice of Victoria sponge? But I can actually say this. Happy July 4th to our American listeners, of which we have many. So I do want to observe the date. Not forgetting, by the way, our Canadian listeners who celebrated Canada Day only a few days ago. But today, I'm going to have to stoop under. Blimey, pups. Barney's in charge of the walk, and he's brought me the way that only something that's a couple of feet tall could navigate through. Right, we're through the bushes. There we go. So yes, Independence Day in America. You decided you prefer your English breakfast without the English. A day celebrated with lots of fireworks and lots of hot dogs, because nothing says independence like a good barbecue. And you do the fireworks in style, don't you? I know. We'd have to lock Sabarkalot away in a soundproof room, I think, if we lived in America land, because he doesn't like fireworks at all. He loves hot dogs, but not fireworks. And even the best hot dog would not tempt him out from behind the sofa on July 4th. So don't worry, Barnes, I'll not mention the F word again, fireworks, and instead talk for a moment about my guest, Tatiana Hopper, who is a contemplative photographer and wonderful philosopher, a teacher on YouTube when it comes to discussing the works and lives of the great photographers and filmmakers of our time. And I'm stepping tentatively here because if one thing Independence Day delivered to my American cousins, that was that you didn't need to continue developing that British self-deprecating thing that might as well be law in this country. So it's with a large slice of self-deprecation and a dash of imposter syndrome on the side when I suggest that I quite often feel I'm not worthy of even a free entrance to an art or photographic gallery because I don't always fully comprehend the labels and the plaques and the description panels. We found the name for them recently, didn't we? Used to describe projects and individual works on the wall. It's like my varifocals have become no-focals and everything is just turned into word soup. So when it comes to the philosophy of photographers, photography and filmmaking and filmmakers, it would take a special kind of teacher to lead me through the gallery and instruct me in the ways of each artist without leaving me to assume emu with a head in the sand yoga pose in the corner of the exhibition room. And that's why I guess I'm so keen on Sean Tucker's approach to the philosophy of why we make pictures on his YouTube channel and within his book. And that's why I'm so delighted a little while back to have discovered Tatiana Hopper's films about this thing that we love, photography, making pictures. taking pictures on her YouTube channel. Tatiana's films, and of course there will be plenty of links on the show page today, are absolute gems when it comes to metaphorically holding your hand regardless of what you think your knowledge is, and guiding you gently through a gallery of ideas, commentary and exploration when it comes to why people worked or work the way they did and do. She's very good at unpicking and unpacking photography, proposing ideas and thoughts and asking you questions such as, what do you photograph when there's nothing supposedly worth photographing? Something I've asked myself many times. Why and how self-portraits can be a vital part of your photographic and life learning. How photographers like Todd Hido might just change the way you look at photography completely. Plus, did you know there was a Russian Vivian Maier, that Ringo Starr was a pretty good photographer, and that there's a forgotten colour photographer from the era of the greats? Tatiana Hopper has 185 videos on her wonderful channel, and I think she just added one. It could be 186. So there's no way in one podcast I can possibly approach every subject she's talked about. I won't even attempt that. But I'll tell you this. If you do today like my introduction to her work as a photographer and filmmaker as you listen to this podcast, you're going to absolutely adore working your way through her catalogue in the weeks and months to come. So consider this today your introduction.
Today on the Photo Walk.
Why do we do the things we do? Why do we choose the subjects we do choose? And what do they mean to us? If I go to Instagram or even YouTube comments or whatever, I'll go there in my own time. It's super important to obviously care about if the video is good, if people are interested in seeing it, but don't let it rule over your life. I'm youngish, but I still have loads of pictures of me taken with these disposable cameras and like on film. So there's a certain nostalgia to it that I think ties in with what I personally visually try to create. The greatest thing you can do as a human being really is not how much you can have in life or how much you can conquer in life, but more so the impression you leave behind.
That's Tatiana Hopper, my guest today on the Photo Walk. Welcome along as we make our Photo Walk together, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying the letters and inspirational stories you've sent in and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around the world. I'll take a peek into the mailbag in a moment for a flavour of today's letters and thoughts on the show. But before that, thank you to our extra milers and MPB who sponsor this show and keep us here week on week. MPB is the largest global platform to buy, sell and trade in used photo and video gear. They're committed to making gear more accessible, more affordable. But don't take my word for it. Although I am a very happy customer of the platform, ask 625,000 visual storytellers, one by one, it'll take you a while, who've used MPB to buy, trade and sell kit, recirculating, and this is important in this age of consumerism, recirculating more than 570,000 cameras, lenses and accessories. And I like the hand-holding, because now and then you need to ask a question about what you're going to buy, and you can receive support through MPB's Help Centre or by speaking with an expert over the phone or via live chat. I've done it myself. And here's the bit I appreciate as a user. Their business model is 100% circular, all packaging 100% plastic free, and their cloud-based platform uses 100% renewable electricity. To get more information, go to the website mpb.com/change. I'll have a link on the show page today, of course. On the show then, finding solace in making photos of family. A strange gift arrived at the office. I'd asked for it, but I wasn't expecting it. Poetry along the path today is inspired by one Philip Larkin. Some thoughts about making pictures of strangers you meet along whatever paths you take. Some Mallee's trees. Yeah, back to Mallee's trees. And if you don't know what a Mallee's tree is, I will explain later. And it being the first Friday of the month, it is assignment week. there's a new challenge for a picture John Angerson would like you to make at some stage over the next month. And in order to find one word to challenge you with, as it's one-word assignments this year, we had to open a pack of cards called Oblique Strategies. Oblique what, Neil? All will be revealed later on. Plus, I'd like you to get your thinking caps on when it comes to the end of July special, which this month is about urban portraits, which I'll talk about later on as well. Lots of laters. It's a bit like being out with mum as a kid. Can we go to the park? Later, darling. Can we have some ice cream? Later, darling. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, well, shoes at the moment, it's summer here, check. SD cards or a spare roll of film, check. Well, let's walk. Now, I know if you're new around these parts, during the checklist, you might well be asking, what, Neil, for the life of a roll of film that hasn't wound on properly, what are Garibaldi's? They are biscuits. A Garibaldi biscuit, also known as dead fly biscuit, is a classic British biscuit. I don't think anywhere else in the world you'd find something described quite so horribly, would you? A dead fly biscuit. It consists of a thin layer of currants, hence the dead flies, sandwiched between two layers of biscuit dough, which is then baked. The biscuit is named after Giuseppe Garibaldi, the Italian general and nationalist, and was first produced in 1861. Another big date in history, never mind American Independence Day, no offence, OVS. But today we observe the birth date of Giuseppe Garibaldi, born in 1807, passed on in 1882. Not, I might add, because he'd eaten too many dead flies. He famously captured Sicily and Naples. Quite how that equated in later years to be celebrated with dead fly biscuits is anybody's guess. But he gets a mention pretty much every week in the introduction to the show, so I thought I'd be sure to observe National Garibaldi Day today, as it officially is. Right, letters. Here's one from Jamie Shepherd, who's writing in with a shutter sync picture, which is where we'll start this week. Usually we do it a little bit later on, but we'll start with it. Why not? We can make the rules, Jamie, can't we? So we'll do the shutter sync picture in a moment. But just in case you haven't caught up with the latest return of this particular feature, this is where you send in a picture of where you're listening to the show right now. After a countdown from 3 to 1, you take your picture and then you send it in, and I pop them on the show page. And we end up each week with a pretty good mini gallery of pictures that depict where you are in the world and in your life as you listen to each episode. That's what Shutter Sync is. And before we do a new one for the week, so ready your camera, or indeed your smartphone, let me read Jamie's letter. Hi, Neil. It's been some months since I last wrote to you. I apologise for not keeping up with your amazing podcast, being a couple of episodes behind. Jamie, steady yourself, sir. I shall have to hide behind the sofa of flattery. I feel my self-deprecating muscles beginning to flex. Well, says Jamie, one career change, a house move, and now fully mobile toddler later, I finally got round to completing a shutter sync while listening to the show. So here's me making up my son's reusable nappies, resting my leg while listening to the podcast. And it's a picture you'll see on the shutter sync feature on the show page today. As for your toddler, now being on his pegs independently, choosing his direction of travel, the fun and games are just beginning, Jamie. Ours found the button for the DVD tray quite early on. And that was the end of playing DVDs for us. I wrote, says Jamie, originally asking for advice about lack of creative juices regarding taking photographs of the young family. But I can happily confirm that we've a very full, currently digital, photo album from birth to 21 months old. Jamie, don't forget, I'm sure I must have said this at the time when you originally wrote in, record the voices too. Voices, come on. Particularly when you're reading your little one a book at bedtime. As I've said before, I'll repeat it again. Can you imagine the power of the book at bedtime when your little one is, they'll be embarrassed about it when they're, 12, 13, 14, 15. But later on in their life, when they're 40 or 50, if they've still got your book at bedtime that you used to read to them, oh, what a powerful and potent treat that will be for them. Your podcast remains as inspirational as ever. I love hearing from all the guests and seeing it evolve from where you started to the show it's become now. Hearing about your other listeners' occasional struggles has actually been inspiring because, I've unfortunately a few of my own, physically and mentally. I was diagnosed with mixed anxiety-depression disorder in 2021, though it was photography and the outdoors that paused my downward spiral and has led me down a path, so to speak, to non-secular paganism. Well, that's where I am right now, at any rate. Physically, I've got a few medical issues, but broadly speaking, I've got pain and inflammation all over my body and mobility issues resultant from. So, among other things, photography in your podcast keeps me sane and allows my mind to truly wander with you and Barney. See, Barney? Bark a lot. You're in a letter. I apologise for the long and rambling email. I hope you, family, and other listener, you're getting mentions now as well, are all well. Many thanks and best wishes, Jamie, settler of Essex, England land. Well, Jamie, this is probably no time for me to talk about red sofas of flattery and hiding behind them because I am truly, honestly, genuinely flattered that you feel the guests and the letter writers have made such a difference to you to that degree through this podcast. I often talk about community, and I'm sure I must sometimes sound like I'm trotting the word out for public display purposes, but it's true. It and this is why the show changed to become the Photo Walk. And why I genuinely mean this, love it so much. It's a highlight of my week, recording this. You need to get out more, Neil. Well, I am. I feel like titling your picture, which will be on the show page in the Shutter Sync feature today, I feel like titling it, A Busy Day at the Office of Domesticity. It's a long title, but if you look at the picture, then you'll understand why. Right, should we do a Shutter Sync? We'll do a new one. So what I'll do is go through the process of 3, 2, 1, then I'll click my camera. So ready your camera or your iPhone, and we'll make a picture together. This is where you are as you're listening to the podcast today. It may not be on a walk. I appreciate that, and I've come to learn that through looking at the Shutter Sync pictures. The amount of vacuuming that's going on while listening to this program. Right, what shall I do? I'll go f5.6. It's quite a bright day now. Beautiful blue skies. Look at that, blue skies. Just gives me an opportunity to sing that song. f5.6, shutter speed 2400, ISO 160, heralded by, some tree surgery going on in the background. And right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. That's my shutter sync. I'm looking back along a path with a sign that says all craft. That's the picture that will be on the show page today, for me anyway. And your ones I will display next week on the programme. So write them in, I'll get them in to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. While I think about it, if you're sending pictures into the show, then if you can optimize them to 2,500 pixels wide, then that really helps the process of getting everything prepared for the show. If you can't, don't worry. I'll do, as they say, the heavy lifting. If you're sending in your pictures from your smartphone, make sure your email, and this goes for any pictures really, doesn't try to resize them to the dimensions of a postage stamp, as sometimes email does. I need a bit of help, please. It really helps the show to be discovered if you leave a review on Apple or Spotify podcasts. To do that, just go to in Apple's case, the Apple Podcasts app, search up The Photo Walk, which is where you should be right now if you're using that app anyway, and then just leave a few words as a review. That way, the great podcast sphere recognises us more and suggests us to more people who like to walk with us and this community. Tatiana Hopper in just a moment's time for part one of my discussion with her. First up, can I thank Sir Michael of Mixonville? In the post this week, I received, and I'll take a picture of it shortly, I received a Star Trek teleporter wristband. Oh yes, complete with an adjustable wrist strap. It's the sort of thing that no respectable Trekkie or Trekker, not quite sure which one you're supposed to use, would be seen without at a Trekker con. I know you know what it is, but my other listener is looking a bit confused. The Star Trek teleporter wristband, also known as the transporter, was a device that disassembled a person's molecules, sounds painful, transmitted them to another location, and then reassembled them, allowing for near instantaneous travel over vast distances, including from a spacecraft down to a planet below. So this idea that you could beam around the planet, for me, I thought, well, that would be particularly useful, wouldn't it, for doing in-person photo walks with photographers all around the world. You could just email them, say, I can be in Tucson, Arizona by, the next 10 minutes. Would that suit you? And they'd say, yeah, no worries. I didn't know you were around the corner, and you'd be there in a flash. So yeah, I'd use it for my interviews. Is that all you'd use it for, Neil? Is that all you've got in mind for it? Of course not. I'd use it for other important things as well, such as shopping in Tesco. So thank you, Sir Michael of Mixonville in America Land, for sending me this. I had no idea why it appeared in the post, when really you could have just beamed it here, surely. But despite that unexpected technical twist, I'm now fully equipped to beam out to somebody, and I think I tell you what, I was about to tell you who I was going to choose, but no, I won't. Let's see if we can get a few. There'll be short emails, letters on this, but go on, pups, go in there. Do you want to have a swim? Go on, in you go. You know you love it. He's so funny. It has to have a gentle incline into the water, otherwise he's not going in. Yeah, let's see where you would beam yourself. I'm sure you'll come up with much more impressive ideas than my own. But send them to stories@photowalk.show. Where would you beam to? Try and keep it photographic for this particular one, or this particular show. I've got to say, my youngest, I'm sure, didn't quite get the idea as I opened the package. He said, Dad, what's that? Because he's never watched Star Trek. Never seen the films, never seen the series, just not a Trekker in any way, shape or form. So he said, Dad, what's that? And I said, it's a teleporter arm wrist thingy. It can beam me anywhere around the globe. And he, no word of a lie, he looked at me and he said, oh, does it need batteries to work? And I said, yes, 4 AA's. Now, there is a loose, not so terribly tenuous connection to my guest when I talk about teleporters, because I talked with Tatiana Hopper, my guest today, about a sort of teleporter, although our ones would be time teleporters. So I think that's the one that has 8 AA batteries. Anyway, here is part 1 of my conversation today with a fantastic YouTuber and photographer, Tatiana Hopper. Although, before we start, I'd like to take a moment and play you just a minute or so from her fantastic educational YouTube channel.
When does photography become art? When do we look at a photograph and think it has surpassed its original intent of capturing a moment in time to become a document of what is timeless? Saul Leiter has done that, Eugene Smith has done that as well. But today I wanted to highlight someone else, Rodney Smith. And with that, detail exactly when and how photography becomes art. Christopher Nolan is a contemporary filmmaker most of us are familiar with. He has directed movies which are equally as intriguing as visually stunning at times.
Bruno Barbet is a Moroccan-born photographer of French and Swiss nationality. He photographed the civil unrest in France during May 1968. However, he rejected the title of war photographer, as he recognized that at the basis of many of these conflicts was the fight for freedom, which is, in essence, a part of life.
Tatiana, your fascination in other photographers is palpable. I sense how passionate you are about other people's work. But what about you? You're a writer, you're a filmmaker, you're a photographer. That much we know. But who is Tatiana Hopper in terms of your own work and interests?
At the moment, I think my work, I'm developing different projects, but it revolves more so around the idea of identity. And it's a little bit more, I would say, slow in terms of like contemplation and perhaps focusing on that. Last December, I actually released my book, my first book, which was not like necessarily your typical photo book, but it was more so like a book that compiled my travels. And I talked about like my experience as a photographer, what I've learned, the places that I've visited, and the sketches of my thoughts when I go. And then hopefully one day I can put out something more like a formal, quote unquote, photo book, as we call it.
Well, I'm going to come back to your book, actually, because I like this idea. And you talk about sketches, and I talk often about the images or the pictures that I make as being sketchbook images. So sketchbooking your way through life, you know, it's not something necessarily very serious as a picture, but it could be. It's documenting life, and we'll come to that. You write poetry as well, don't you?
I did at some point, and I actually put a book out. This was way before YouTube, and I did for a while. I haven't done it as often in a long time now, because this is actually, I appreciate you're digging back in time here, but I haven't done, and it's actually one of my goals for this year to go back into, writing and hopefully tie in with other areas. But yes, I think it started with poetry to gain more so confidence and more at ease with writing. Yeah, I want to go back to it. It's just with, I'd say, YouTube and other creative ventures, it's kind of a mix of things that
somebody needs to design or invent another day in the week, really, for the poetry as well, don't they? Yeah.
Absolutely. And for all the other things I hope to do and achieve. And
in fact, one day's not enough. We need 3 or 4, perhaps, extra days. If somebody could come up with that would be amazing. Your brother's a photographer as well. Does that mean there's a sort of a family member who was inspiring you from an early age?
No, actually, my family, it's funny because me and my brother are quite creative. My brother is a little bit more practical than I would be. I'm more of the idealistic sort of person. And I speak with him and he goes, okay, let's do this. Let's turn this into a reality. So he's very practical, is an amazing brother. But we are very creative. I think our family, they're not creative at all. They're more so, they're very logic, practical people. So it was kind of an interest that we both had since we were kids. And I think that's, also how we had a nice close connection and bond is because of our appreciation for art and photography.
Where did you grow up? Where was home?
So home was Portugal for a while, but now it's not anymore.
No, I know.
But yes, so growing up, and it was definitely like extremely different. And I think that's one of the things I appreciate about my life is that I've lived in different countries, different cultures. And so I've become very acquainted with change, with appreciating other people and what they have to say, their culture. And that's why I think it ties in with photography. That's why my interest in studying as well other people's work, from decades where I have never even lived or places that I've never even been. I think it's because of how my own life, in a way, has developed over the past years.
In terms of your photography, I look at your work and I do feel, and you've mooted this already, a sense of quiet, trees in the fog, 2 chairs in the sun of Alicante. It feels to me like, as you say, a life of contemplation, which definitely carries through to your films.
I think it does. And that's why I was hoping to perhaps go back to writing or even obviously what I studied really was filmmaking. So, I mean, I've made films before and I want to dive back into it because I feel like it really ties in with, my photography, the things that I like to talk about. But I'm glad that people are able to perceive that in my work.
And you've stayed very faithful to the medium of film, haven't you? I mean, I know you work with digital. Your films are made with a digital camera, but you stay very faithful to film. And I wonder why that is. Is that because of this deep fascination with a lot of photographers who, of course, would only ever have worked with the currency of film?
It's different reasons. I think it ties in with the themes that I touch in, the contemplation, the nostalgia. Say, I've been working forever in this book that I want to hopefully put out one day around my family and around what it's like for me to visit Portugal now that I've been away for so long. So that idea of nostalgia, that idea of, almost dreamy like contemplation, it ties in with the medium of film itself, because I think film in its texture, color, it really ties in with that sort of feeling and atmosphere. Like when you look back to, say, old family photos and they were all made with film or on film, right? I mean, I'm youngish, but I still have loads of pictures of me taken with these disposable cameras and like on film. So there's a certain nostalgia to it that I think ties in with what I personally visually try to create. And then another thing is me as an individual, I just am not a very like technology kind of person, as in like I love like things being seamless. I mean, in my studio, which I know you're able to see, so I'm actually just changing things here. I'm making everything very seamless because part of my generation is a generation of everything has to be seamless at a touch of a button. But then when I apply that to creativity and being creative, I like to take my time with things. I don't like it to be as seamless. I like to make room for mistakes, make room for exploration. And I feel like in the practical terms, shooting with digital, which I probably would have to do, for work or other things that will come up in the future, I'll never say no. Yeah. But I think for my personal work, I'd like film to be my main sort of medium. It's
interesting because we're celebrating the imperfect at the moment.
Yes.
And film gives you that opportunity, as you've made films about in the past, to just be enveloped by the opportunity to be imperfect.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've reached the pinnacle in society where less is more. I mean, I've noticed that with advertising, like less screens, less numbers is more now. It's a thing that, over the past 20 years, people would say you have more megapixels, you have more this and more that to sell you something. And now it's the contrary. It's like people are making phones, for instance, cell phones or smartphones, if you will, like that are just in no connection to the internet to call people and whatever. So we're going back in time in what it is. So I think we live in an era where less is more and we celebrate a bit of the imperfection, because I think maybe we as society strive to perfection, but it's never attainable.
Sort of along the same lines. I mean, I think that's the beauty of the camera manufacturers like Fujifilm and Nikon, however you pronounce them in your part of the world. Having things that have buttons on them that's analog. You turn and there's a tangible feel to that when you use a camera, which is what you get when you use a film camera.
It's more reductive as well because you don't have many options. You don't contemplate if you're going to apply whatever filter, if you're going to shoot monochrome, and then you can swap to color and you can apply whatever recipe and you can just you just have the dials and you just do it based on, your intuition sometimes, with film as well, because you have to be able to read the scene. And sometimes you can be a little bit under or a little bit over, but, that's also the artisanish beauty of it, if you will.
You've sort of alluded to it, but from where did the interest come to teach? And why YouTube as a platform for that?
Since I was very young, since I was like a teenager almost, I was always doing things in the internet. So before YouTube, I was writing about filmmaking. I was making articles online about how to learn with certain filmmakers, certain, visual creative people. And photography was always like one of my main passions. And I sort of thought like, what if I just did this in a sort of video format? And at the time, I remember when I was thinking of creating a YouTube channel, I was like, well, I would like to, but what should I do this about? And I started actually by making videos just like me with a camera, walking around, taking pictures. But I just knew it wasn't really what I wanted to do. Or if I did it, I wanted to at least talk about the philosophy of it. That came with my appreciation for the past. And also I wanted to learn as a photographer, and I'll never cease to learn as a photographer. I mean, with each video, I always say, people learn with it, but hopefully people learn with it. But I will definitely learn with it. It's also a learning curve for me to learn about that photographer, to observe this detail and that detail. And I think in many ways, it's something that I probably would do for myself. So the fact that I can do it and share with other people, that's, a great blessing.
And I have to say that definitely comes across. I never feel like I'm attending a lecture when I watch your films. Piecing together an educational film about a photographer could probably be a daunting task, particularly if you're trying to squeeze a career into, say, 15 minutes. What's your process in terms of writing and thoughts and perhaps storyboarding?
So with writing is one thing, and then obviously the visuals is another thing. I do some storyboarding for certain things. I've started doing it not that long ago because I wanted to, and I want to make my videos better. Like I want to have more quality in them visually. Recently, I started a new series on the channel. It's about filmmakers. Yeah. So, the Christopher Nolan video and now Quentin Tarantino. So I don't know if I've done this with Tarantino, but I just look for motives and then I try to explore them in the intro. Say with Christopher Nolan was the little sphere that they do in Inception. Yes, so I bought one and I was trying to do like a thing around it. And obviously books as well is good. And the idea of like the flow and movement with each page. And then with writing, there's a lot of it starts obviously with research, but before researching for things, I always say this, I always write my notes and my thoughts on whatever photograph, book, individual, what I think of their work before looking for where they were born, perspectives and more information, because I don't want my first thoughts to be sort of tainted by whatever I see out there. I want it to be, and that's why in my videos, I make a big effort into telling you the story of somebody, but also putting in my, 2 cents of what is my perspective over their work or what it can possibly mean. I did that quite recently with my video on Masahisa Fukase, the Japanese photographer, where I sort of argued that, maybe he's not obsessed with photography as people may want you to think, or it's definitely a process of research, but also putting in my own perspective in it.
The film about Christopher Nolan, I mean, and Tarantino, but Christopher Nolan. By the way, you made me watch Inception. I hadn't seen Inception, and it was your film. I thought, right, I'm going to watch Inception.
Did you like it?
I'm still confused.
I know.
I wonder if you have to watch Inception like I watch a Terry Gilliam film, late at night, a Friday night, and you think, I think I can cope with this. It's late at night on a Friday, and everything's weird late at night on a Friday, so I think I can cope with it. And I think I might have to watch Inception late at night on a Friday with nobody else around me at all. But that was, it was quite the story about him as a filmmaker. It feels to me like if you'd have had a crew around you to research that film would have taken weeks. Just how long does it take to make your films?
It doesn't take me that long because, quite frankly, I mean, this is what I do, like, as a human. I mean, I love just learning these things. I mean, in my spare time, I watch movies. I will randomly text a friend, what did you think of that scene? And then so we talk about very specific things. So for me, I think, it doesn't take me that long because usually I'll watch the movies that I need to watch on my spare time or whenever I want to watch. Or for instance, I'm watching a movie and I think, oh my God, I need to make a video about this guy because I actually know like about his work or whatever. Or and the same happens with photographers. I mean, I'll just buy loads of books and I'll go through it on my spare time. So usually about a week, depending on the subject. But yeah.
Can I make I don't think you've made one about Terry Gilliam, but can I put a request in for a Tatiana Hopper?
Yeah,
film
Terry Gilliam.
Terry Gilliam.
Brazil.
That remains one of my favourite weirdest movies of all time.
Weirdest movies of all time.
It's a late Friday night film, definitely. That Brazil. Yeah. YouTube. Now, we were talking about social media last week. It's a juggernaut, isn't it, YouTube? What's your relationship with social media like?
See, I'm not those types of people that will say I hate it or I love it, or, I mean, in my life, things will have the importance I want to give them. So I think YouTube is extremely important in the sense that, it is my actual job. So like, it is important to that extent of like, okay, I have that obligation with my audience to give my best and to produce the best videos I can. I love that I can obviously connect with people from all walks of life. And, I'm forever grateful for the opportunities that I've been given through YouTube, people that I've met. But I wouldn't let it rule my life per se. So for instance, like in my day-to-day, I have no notifications from social media. I will only go there on my own time. Yeah. So if I post a video, of course, I can check on the performance of the video and whatever. But like if I go to Instagram or even YouTube comments or whatever, I'll go there in my own time because I feel like it's quite easy to get caught up in the social media and algorithms and people messaging you or getting, for instance, like criticism and whatnot. And I actually have spoken about this with other friends of mine that create content, not around photography. There's just other content creators. And we all agreed that, it's super important to obviously care about if the video is good, if people are interested in seeing it, but don't let it rule over your life.
So you never feel like you're having to feed the machine, which I know sounds very Orwellian.
No, actually, I use that. This is very eerie because I use that same expression this week. I really appreciate Orwell and I've read his books. So I think maybe that's where my fascination with him comes. And I use that a lot. I always say like we're feeding the machine, but not just with YouTube, with so many things that we do, like with giving our time to anything is feeding whatever machine, So
I suppose we are now in many respects. Identity and integrity. Two words, I think, that describe you, your photography and your filmmaking, and certainly your YouTube channel. And in terms of integrity, it feels like you haven't gone searching for views. You've found something you enjoy doing, and you've let your audience come along on that journey, finding a new audience along the path. And you've certainly not thought, well, I know what's popular. I'll make something about kit, and that will unlock a much larger audience. Not many YouTubers, I think, manage to do that. Well, I don't think, anyway.
Yeah, I managed to probably stay, quote unquote, clear of something that really wasn't my main interest anyway. Like, I never watched gear reviews. I never really watched like content like that. I mean, maybe when I was starting photography more seriously and I watched certain channels for their opinions because I appreciated their opinions, and it was a guiding light almost. But deep down as a person as well, that's not what my interest is. I also like to explore storytelling and, the documentary sort of cinematic side of things, like, and that's not just from a visual point of view, but how do we tell stories? For instance, with I'll circle back to the Japanese photographer Masahisa Fukase. The point is, how am I going to tell his story? And how am I going to tell people that whatever media outlets have called him obsessed with photography, it's not really the case. So that proposes a much more challenging and interesting, exercise for me as a creator than to make a video about a camera that I've used during a certain amount of time, and I have to speak on all the possibilities of that camera and all the buttons and what do they do. I just don't find it as interesting for me. But, it's maybe my personal taste, just like who I am.
Well, let's talk about something that's altogether more personal for a moment. It's hard enough for many of us to think about making self-portraits, certainly as anything more than a selfie shared more usually with a friend or a loved one. But to consciously decide to make a film that includes self-portraits alongside a study about acceptance and self-growth, well, that's a whole new level of vulnerability. I'd like you to talk about this film you made called The Importance of Self-Portraits. But let's take a few moments from the opening of that film first.
Frida Kahlo was, until 1939, a Mexican painter known for being the wife of Diego Rivera, a predominant Mexican painter worldly famous for his murals. However, after achieving international fame, she returns home, divorces Mr. Rivera, and goes on to paint a self-portrait in male clothing with her hair cropped. And this is how she chose to portray the changes in her life and how she saw herself then. Of course, knowing somewhat of her work, we know that her many self-portraits are filled with symbolism. But this example opens the door for today's video. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of self-portraits as ways to deal with our identity, which is the word we give to this constant self-discovery journey we live throughout our lives.
Well, I'll link to that film on the show page today. Of course, Tatiana, you certainly, in terms of tackling issues like mental health, acceptance and growth, invited the viewer to see that through a lens into your own life. I think that was a reasonably bold film to make, actually.
I think that project really, I wish that one day, maybe hopefully if I get to be older, I can look back and see myself aging through my photos and see my life in a reverse and appreciate who I am as a person. I think we live in a strange age where, I don't know when it started really. Maybe it's not just now. It's always been like this. I can only speak from my time on Earth. But we live in this age where just nothing is ever, we always want more. And it's hard to be content. There's always something, especially with beauty, for instance, if we go to the most, just superficial reasonings, but beauty, there's always something that you'd like to change about yourself. There's always something that you would like to see different in yourself. There's always clothes or this or that. And I think we live in an age where it's really, really hard to accept yourself for who you are. And also because we live in an age of comparison. Everything that one has, everything that one sees is by virtue compared with someone else's. And I think that exercise really helped me surpass some not issues, but I'd say perhaps problems that I had with accepting who I was and this is what I look like. This is who I am. This is for instance, I can speak on it from a perspective of femininity. I wouldn't be the most feminine of women, but I wouldn't be a masculine woman in this case. So where do I stand and how do I learn to accept myself and not be, as a kid, I suffered bullying in school. So, it kind of makes you think okay, look, am I okay? Is something wrong with me? And you grow up and you keep these questions with, the inevitable comparison between you and other people and where do you fit in? And I think that exercise of photographing myself and really turning the camera, quote unquote, on me without being cliche was very vital for me to be you don't have to conform with certain norms or certain representations, and you can just be yourself.
Well, it sounds like it was a cathartic experience and a scary one as well at times. You didn't sugarcoat this project, from what I see.
it was not just like when you were having an okay day on your out photographing. I chose sometimes certain moments where literally something really bad had happened, and I was like, I'm going to take a picture of myself. And it was a way of confronting certain ideas that I also had about myself as an individual. So it was cathartic, and it was quite, something that, over that video, I've gotten so many messages of people saying that, like, it touched me, I've started doing it, or I've done. And that's ultimately what you want. As a person, like, you want to be able to leave or to help people in a way, or to create a nice message, for people. Through your own struggles, you're able to just put something positive out there.
Tatiana Hopper is my guest today, and she'll be back shortly, where, of course, I feel we'll certainly be asking the question, why? This week's Poetry Along the Path is suggested by Daniel Parks. Neil, I don't consider myself a poet, though I do wish it's a skill I had. You mentioned a while back, though, the poetry of Philip Larkin. Did you know he wrote one that was essentially an ode to photography? So, Daniel, I'll leave a link on the show page to the full poem, but in the meantime, a couple of thoughts from that one you suggested.
But oh, photography as no art is, faithful and disappointing, that records dull days as dull, and hold its smiles as frauds, and will not censor blemishes, like washing lines and hall's distemper boards, but shows a cat as disinclined and shades, her chin as doubled when it is. What grace your candour thus confers upon her face, how overwhelmingly persuades that this is a real girl in a real place, in short, a past that no one now can share. No matter who's your future, calm and dry, it holds you like a heaven, and you lie, invariably lovely there, smaller and clearer as the years go by.
Philip Larkin, one of certainly England's most celebrated poets, born 1922, died 1985. He wrote poems that explored themes of loneliness, aging and the passage of time, but along the way, he used wit and irony and sharp observations of everyday life. I have a couple of books now, a couple of poetry books, Larkin books, which I dip into from time to time. If you have a poem for the path, and that includes poetic thoughts or perhaps haiku that embraces your love of walking or photography or both, then I'd love to hear from you. Write to stories@photowalk.show. I started this feature about a month ago, and I was of the I'm not sure how it will roll opinion, because I know poetry is something that it kind of has this, I don't know, this feeling of highbrow about it that I think puts some people off. So I suppose really it's I'm passing the baton over to you to see if you have something to offer up on that front. It's something we'll actually be doing on the Scottish, well, not necessarily poetry, but creative writing on the Scottish retreat this year, which is getting closer all the time. The end of July, we have the next of our specials. Now, we did social media last week, end of June. The end of July will be urban portraits, loosely urban portraits, because that could be street portraits or just portraits of the people you meet as you live your life and meet fascinating individuals. I've certainly had that experience of late myself. So far on the show, I've lined up Gabrielle Matola, who is a super street photographer, well, an amazing photographer, full stop, but she certainly speaks well on the subject of street portraiture. Extra miler, photographer and writer Paul Hudson, and our monthly friend of the show, street photographer and mentor Valerie Jardin, possibly Sean as well, Sean Tucker. I'm not sure. He's doing quite a bit of stuff at the moment. Maybe our paths will cross. Talking of cross, I'm looking across the river at the moment, and the cows, the cattle have all come along to take a drink on the other side. Oh, it's a shame they're not in the sunlight, but I tell you what. Oh no, this is okay. Let me get just a sketchbook image. There we go. Mum and calf. Now, Barney is a bit of a devil with cattle, and I usually have to keep I always have to keep my eye out to check that there's, particularly when we walk on common land where there's free roaming cattle, just to make sure that he doesn't go trying to play with them. They're rather larger than he is, and it's calving at the moment, of course, which means they're rightly protective of their offspring. Look at that one, Barney. That's got sort of rings round its eyes, like it's wearing a mask. Looks like she wants to swim across. Come on, Barnes, this way. I'm not sure they're play buddies for you. This is not a play date, that's for sure. But with this special I could do with your help, I would like some letters from you, if possible. That is, if you make street portraits or portraits of people, and we'll call them urban portraits as well. Come on, pups, this way. Let me have your thoughts about it and how you fare with making those pictures, or if you'd like to get better or even start making those photographs, those portraits. Perhaps you could answer some of the questions that I've sort of got a starter for 10 here, as it were. I'll leave these questions, note to self, leave these on the show page. Do you photograph strangers for portraits, to start with? That would be a good out the traps question. How do you approach strangers for street portraits without feeling intrusive? I'd like some tips from you. What techniques have you used to make your subjects feel comfortable and relaxed? How did you overcome any initial fears or anxieties about photographing people in public? And if you haven't got over that, I'm equally intrigued to hear from you. What advice would you give about handling rejection? That's a big subject when it comes to making portraits on the street. What gear or settings do you prefer? Yes, it's a gear question, but I think it's very relevant when it comes to working quickly with strangers on the street. They don't want to be there for, I just need to do this with my, and that, hold on, shutters, although it's a conversation and communication between the two of you, it's not something where you really want to spend a long time setting yourself up. So what gear, what settings do you use? And then how do you develop your eye for interesting subjects and compelling street portraits? Just some starter thoughts. You may well have your own thoughts and suggestions to make. Send them to, it's the last Friday of this month of July, send them to stories@photowalk.show. stories@photowalk.show. Such a wonderful day today. Puppy, come on, we're going this way. He's looking confused. I've turned left when usually he turns right along this particular path. You're a real creature of habit, you are. Look, that's a complete refusal to walk this way. I'm going to make a photograph of you, pups. It'll be like one of my famous red arrow shots. You know, where she made the picture. Oh, let's get another one. A sketchbooker, f5.6, shutter speed 950. A tiny dog along the way, being stubborn. Yes, my mum's red arrow shots, her famous red arrow shots, where she'd used the Kodak Instamatic to photograph the red arrows. And the lens was, what was the lens? Was it 24 mil? Something like that. It was quite wide, wasn't it? So always, when the pictures came back, we'd have that conversation. There's the red arrows. No, it's not, Mum. No, it's not. I'm going to the Royal International Air Tattoo with my cameras in a few weeks' time with my son. Maybe we'll beam there, since he thought we only needed to put 4 AA batteries into the wristband, although we've only got one. Foiled on that plan. But yeah, we're going to the Royal International Air Tattoo, and I'm going to try and make some street or urban or air show portraits while I'm there. There's always fascinating people to talk with and photograph. The air show itself is always interesting, but I'm not really there to photograph the aircraft in the sky. I'm more really there for, I love photographing events. events are interesting as photographic material in and of themselves. It's the Photo Walk show on a Friday. Me with my camera and dog and walking shoes. You with your camera. I've got your letters as well. Just spending some time together along the path, making pictures as we go and listening to the fantastic guests that we're able to talk to from around the world. Mally's trees. Now, we haven't talked about Mally's trees for a while. Mally Davis, is one of our extra milers and a good friend of the show and pops up sometimes on the shows as well, talking about all sorts of things. And Mally he's a terrific photographer of many disciplines now, including his great street photography that's featured recently on his YouTube channel. But equally, his tree photography is just incredible. His woodland photography, his tree photography, his nature photography, superb. He has a real skill. And I love his work. I'll leave a link. I'm sure you've seen it, but come on, pups, where did you go? But for my other listener, if you haven't seen his work before, I'll share a link on the show page today. So Mally's trees. We, as a family, it's become sort of, fabled? It's become language in our family anyway when we're out and we see a lone tree on the side of a hill or anything really tree-wise that looks interesting. Somebody in the car will say, "Look, it's a Mally's tree." It'll usually be a tree. This is always the way it works. We're completely unable to get to. It's up a hill. It's just off a motorway. There's no way you can stop. But that's that's what a Mally's tree is. And we haven't talked about a Mally's tree for a while. So here's a couple of letters. First from Chad Garner. Good evening, Neil, from North Carolina land. After listening to episode 386, I appreciate this is a while ago now, and hearing your interview with Mally Davis regarding Find Your Tree, which was a feature. It was a feature just for a short while. It sort of caught on for a short while. And there's a few letters still to read, which is what I'm doing now. I believe I found my tree during my many walks around my neighbourhood. The tree is a Japanese maple that's located in front of my parents' yard as you first drive into their driveway. I've always enjoyed the changing of the colours and tones of reds and oranges every season. The image I will call Burning Maple was taken one evening as the sun was setting, and I just so happened to be walking home from my parents. The sun was shining through the trees and made it seem like it was on fire. Absolutely love the reds and oranges and the sun star bursting through the leaves. Thank you as always. Hope you're doing well. Your other listener, Chad Garner. Hang on, Chad. Hold that thought. There's a Mally's tree. Now this one, it looks quite dead, and the light has come out just at the right moment. Make a picture, Neil. 1000 shutter speed, f5.6, 160 ISO. The only trouble is, and I'll try to shoot shallower, but it's not that close to me, so it won't make a lot of difference. No difference, really. The only difference, or the only difficulty, rather, is trying to separate it from what's around it. But that would be a Mally's tree, you see. Yeah, I can see that, Neil. Yeah, now I get it. See? Mally's tree. One from Chad, one from me. Chad's is so much better. Trust me. I'll put the picture on the show page. I love the fire in the picture. You're absolutely right about that. And I also used it on our Instagram grid. Also on the show page today, a Mally's tree from David Horn. Hello, Neil. I'd like to add a couple of my tree photos to the Mally's tree feature. I feel it may be coming back. First photo, while fishing with my son-in-law one morning, I put down the rod, picked up my camera and shot this tree stroke reflection. Second picture, while on a photo walk in the hills above my home, I shot this lone tree and clouds. I do love that one. They're both great, but this is full of depth, it really is. Probably my love of monochrome, but there's a sort of, am I reading too much into this? But I felt a certain melancholy. Well, no, it's a melancholic tree set against this breathtaking landscape. It really is fantastic. So, I'll put that on the show page as well. So thank you, David, for that. And thank you, Chad. Right. An assignment. It being the first Friday of the month, it's assignment time, a challenge for a picture John Angerson would like you to make at some stage over the next month. One-word assignments this year. Let's hear from John.
The photo walk assignment.
John, when we were walking, and I wish you'd have brought it with you, but there was no way you'd have been prepared enough to have brought a random box of cards with you. That would have been strange had you said to me on the day of our photo walk, "Oh, I just happen to have these cards with me, Neil." It might have seemed a bit odd, but we were talking about you setting an assignment, and you said, "Oh, I've got just the thing for that. Tell me about this box, because it's brilliant."
Okay, so I bought these when I was a student in the sort of 90s, and they were created by the musician Brian Eno and an artist friend of his called Peter Schmidt.
Okay.
And they're called oblique strategy cards.
Right.
They're nothing to do with the occult. There's no hocus pocus going on. We aren't going to suddenly be turned into frogs. But it's a set of creative block cards. So I probably should still carry them in the back of my camera bag. And when I was doing something and I got stuck with an idea or I didn't know where to go with it, I would shuffle them and I would make up a random number in my head, and a card would come up and it would possibly send me somewhere. And it says, give the game away.
Okay, so the oblique strategies are offering you an answer to the questions of the universe. You can't find one for yourself.
Or a potential route to take something somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
They're not and the most important thing I think with them is to not take it literally, is you get that in your head and think, oh, maybe I can change this around and try a different approach. And quite often they give you they just almost pause you from what you're doing and give you a little ladder to go somewhere else. Because whenever I've shown friends or colleagues these, quite often people use them literally. I think you've got to sort of be quite creative with what it says to you, because sometimes it will just give you a little spark to try something else.
All right, well, can I have a go at them?
Yeah, of course you can.
So I've been having a quandary, and it's another podcast that I'm releasing about a subject I know very, very well, which is wedding photography. That I'm decided on. There's no decision to make there. The decision that I've been making is what to call it. And I don't know if you're a bit like me with your photo projects, but anything to do with books, photo projects, creativity generally, I've met writers that have said this. They have to have the title first before they can even put pen to paper. And that can work creatively as well for photo projects for me. I find if I have a title, sometimes it's a piece of music, then I think, oh, I know I can do a whole project about that, but I can't start without that starting block. And for me, the quite literal block, not the one that you just run out of, it is the name. I've decided a name, and I just need to decide whether it's right or wrong.
Okay.
So I know what it's called. Do you need to know the title of the show? No, not necessarily.
I'm not sure. There's another book I've got downstairs, which is the Book of Answers. Have you got the Book of Answers?
I think I have got the Book of Answers.
Yeah. But this might help you. But it's not really an answer. It doesn't necessarily give you an answer. It gives you a new.
Well, the strategy is. Yeah, I see. It's not
strategy rather than an answer.
I'm hoping the strategy would be something along the lines of just get on with it.
Yeah, let's see.
Right, okay. So, have you shuffled them? Have you shuffled them?
I'll shuffle them a bit more.
How many cards are there in this?
I think there's about 50.
So I'm just going to use a number 13.
Oh,
see?
1, 2.
So I know a lot of people are very uncomfortable with the number 13. I think it's actually a lucky number in some European countries. Right.
Oh, very good. This maybe is the answer.
Right.
What mistakes did you make last time?
Oh, that's what it says.
So what mistakes did you make?
I think in terms of if this were about podcasts, the last time I launched on one name and then changed halfway through.
So you maybe got to commit. See, there you go. Yeah.
Strategies appearing. Right, shall we set an assignment while I think about that? Because now, in this box of cards, these oblique strategies, we're doing one-word assignments this month, so we can't really choose anything that's outside the one-word answer. There are 7 cards within that box, though, that have one word on them. And rather than make it up and say, oh, we're going to choose between 1 and 7, and then we have actually elected for the card. There's 2 that will make really good ones. One of them's a bit trickier. So what is the one that you've chosen?
Destroy.
There we go. One word, destroy. I suppose there might be a nuanced subtlety. Can you have a nuanced subtlety between destroy and destruction? But I'll leave that with you. Interpret as you will. Winner of the flask for last month will have to be next week on the show. I know it should have been. I've not done my homework. The story of my life. I am still uploading them right now. They'll probably be there when you hear this these thoughts. But for the moment, can I give you a winner next week, like I did last month? Oh, go on, Neil. We're all friends here. So send your entries to the assignment to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide if you can manage it. One picture, please. Just one picture for the assignment. If you want to send me a few words about the picture that you've made, then that's always appreciated as well. And good luck. Destroy. Destroy. Very strong word. Very powerful word. A couple of quick letters before we hear the second part of my chat today with Tatiana Hopper, neither of which are really photographic. But I'd have to shoehorn them if I wanted to try and make them so. But we'll have plenty of that in a moment. This one from Bob of the Desert in Arizona, the cinematographer, who lives, funnily enough, we mentioned Tucson. I was thinking about this letter coming up. That's where he's based. He sent me an internal digi-memo from Michelle, who works in the office with him, I think. It simply reads, "Hey there, friendly reminder to be aware of your surroundings when coming into the office. The landscaping crew found a rattlesnake this morning near our building." I could see there were 5 replies, Bob, but I didn't get to see those from the screen grab. There were also 16 emojis, the scream horror one, which is probably what I might have sent. I live in a country where the most dangerous thing, Bob, that we'd find near the building would be half a kebab lobbed over the fence by some ne'er-do-well on an e-scooter as he weaved his way home from the pub last night. Certainly not a rattlesnake. I am looking forward to my trip to Florida, which is very soon. And last time I was making urban portraits, and I wandered right out into a field to photograph this chap who was collecting cans. It was near Daytona Beach, actually, and I remember him looking at me like I lost the plot, and he said, I was watching you come across that the grass there. He said, I'm surprised that you got to me before the rattlesnakes got to you. I walked tentatively back from my photograph, my portrait with him. So Bob, be careful. Make sure you report in at regular intervals, please, and don't go gardening. There's my instructions. And then this letter, which is a sort of a two-parter, actually. Pups, where have you gone? Come on, pups, this way. Come on. Are you chasing something? The rattlesnakes will get you. Honestly, they will. This letter, which is a sort of a two-parter, because it's the play-out song of the show today. It's from Alan Sorensen, who wrote in about the most wonderful play-out song, which you will hear today. He actually wrote in about quotes for our PS at the end of the show. Neil, lots of quotes come to mind for PS, but this one has spoken to me recently. It comes from a song that popped up on a Spotify playlist and stopped me right in my tracks. The quote and the title of the song by Andrew Peterson, "Be kind to yourself," and the follow-up phrase, "You've got to learn to love your enemies too," taken within the context of this song, speaks of the importance of self-compassion to me. And so, the song "Be kind to yourself," and one of the phrases within, "You've got to learn to love your enemies too." Upon first hearing, I thought it had a religious message, but after further investigation, I learned that he wrote it for his daughter and has a wider context. As a father, says Alan, with 2 daughters and someone who tends to beat up on myself, this song made a powerful impression. There's a video that has him singing it to his daughter, and Alan, yes, I will, of course, pop that video on the show page today. It's just wonderful. And you can look forward to the song after the second part of my conversation today with our studio guest, Tatiana Hopper.
I'd like to talk about some of your films, and we'll start by having a chat about the films you've recently been making about the filmmakers. And this one, titled What Quentin Tarantino Can Teach All Photographers. And for a fair proportion of the start of the film, at least, the main takeaway seems to be just press record. Get on with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I loved his very nonchalant philosophy. I sometimes make videos where it's a little bit more abstract, a little bit more, on the realm of like intellectuals. But here it was just like a guy saying it, just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Or for instance, like when he said something about like, he knew that he would take something from the first time he went to jail because he would learn some great dialogue. I think it's funny, and it's just a very nonchalant way of taking some really good messages. Yeah. I mean, from his life experience to yours, if you can apply it. I mean, hopefully you won't be in jail learning dialogues, but you turn negatives into positives, I suppose, or you look into the bright side of light, like Monty Python so preaches.
And I was fascinated too by your film on the photography of Stella Lansing. Tell me about her, because I've been looking for modern day paranormal photography and photographers, and they're really hard to find, actually. Well, I'm finding it hard.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a challenging discipline, I would say, because even me making that research, and that was obviously the podcast with my good friend Sadie, even us when we were debating it, even before recording the episode, it's just, how do you approach that without taking your skepticism hat off and just diving into it, knowing full well that majority of the audience will not look at it with the same sort of interest or even, non-skeptical look. So it's a challenging one, but I enjoyed making it. I think it was an interesting one. But I haven't found as well many photographers photographing that sort of phenomena these days.
Yeah, there don't seem to be any. This seems to be a good point, actually, to talk about your co-presenter in those particular series, and that particular series, Nighthawks. I know it's a limited series of podcasts, but I really do like this sort of midnight caller approach.
Yeah.
Tell me about Nighthawks.
So Nighthawks was a project that, to be honest with you, it was born from the audience's desire for me to create a podcast. And I just wanted to create something different. I just wanted to test my boundaries as well. Yeah. Like, not only we're talking about photography, but in a different realm. And at least that's what our aim was for season 1, the weird and fantastic, but also very interesting aspects of and corners of photography. And also the approach of like Nighthawks. I mean, it was kind of like inspired by Edward Hopper, obviously, the painting. And it's more so like a curious approach to photography as well. And I really appreciated that because it got to touch on very different stuff that even I didn't know. Yeah. I think one of my favorite episodes was actually the one where we talked about time traveling, but not so much the part of like the people that quote unquote probably did it, but more so that project that that young man Taylor did when he photographed a photograph of another photograph. Yeah. And so it makes you think of time, and it makes you think of the capacities that photography really has, and how much territories remains unexplored in terms of like how much can we come up with, And I thought it was one of my favorite moments as well. And it was such a rewarding experience.
I know it wasn't about your own personal time travel necessarily, but if you could time travel and you thought, all right, who would I like to speak to? Having made films about these greats, who would I go and choose to spend a Friday night in that bar with, talking about their work? I wonder where you'd time travel. I think I know where I'd go, but what about you?
Tell me about you first.
I'd definitely go, and I'd like to sit down and have coffee with William Eggleston in the 60s and 70s, somewhere in that time, maybe late 60s.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we could find that red room just for luck, I'd like to do that. I'd be fascinated to learn more about his absolute interest for the mundane and trivial beauty of stuff that we most ordinarily walk by from or of. And this shooting style that he had of making one picture, move on, one picture, move on. Mm-hmm. Who would you choose?
Two people came to mind.
Oh, you can have two.
Okay, so if I could, I would go back to a certain point in time where Eugene Smith would be working alone in his darkroom in his apartment and would be incessantly, we would be probably essentially going through details, but I wouldn't talk. I would just
Watch.
Just observe.
Observe, yeah.
Just observe.
Yeah.
There's something about his work. I mean, his black and white, his intention, and it's just something about that. Or perhaps when he was working in Pittsburgh and I would just take a walk and see him doing his thing and just, I mean, I wouldn't say take notes, but probably if I could take a moment or two with him and ask a few questions, I probably would. So that's one. And then I think the second one would actually be a filmmaker. But I would love to go and maybe have a chat or be with Andrei Tarkovsky when he was filming one of his films. I don't know, perhaps my favorite film, Andrei Rublev. And I would love to be on that set and just maybe help in some capacity, but also just observe what they do for a day.
If you spend enough time writing films about photography and photographers, it undoubtedly has a lasting impression, whether that's observational or inspirational. And Dorothea Lange, Sally Mann, Harry Gruart. How does it affect your work, what you photograph and how you photograph?
I think it's very interesting because through the study of all these photographers, I've learned so much, but first and foremost about the importance of intention and message. Like, why do you do the things you do? And I think this is such an important question that even I touched on Tarantino's video. I said you have to have a strong why for when people ask you, one of the takeaways from that video. But really, why do we do the things we do? Why do we choose the subjects we do choose? And what do they mean to us? So through these videos, I've been able to really, really put these questions onto myself. For instance, if I'm talking about Dorothea Lange, for instance, and I'm talking about the work that she did photographing the migrant mother, or how she did it. Like she captured, 6 photos until she actually felt that she had it.
Yeah.
How do you know that you have it? So all these questions that are a bit more of a profound nature that I think I've been able to really ask back to myself and reflect upon it, I think. For instance, like, why, as a photographer, what do I want to do with my work? Why do I want to, go back, for instance, to photographing my family and, the country that I haven't visited in ages? Why do I want to do that? What does that, reflecting upon the intention. And so that's one of the things that I think it has really, really helped me with. Those things have been like absolutely the most rewarding things that I've been able to take from these photographers. Absolutely, from my films.
Talking of a photographer, you did the next best thing to discovering a new colour. You found a new colour photographer. It was a name I didn't know, William Christenberry. It's phenomenal work.
It is phenomenal work. And actually, I knew of Christenberry for a really, really long time. So it started with when I was a teenager, maybe, like I was learning about the Great Depression in school and I was going through the photography of Dorothea Lange and whatnot. And then that took me down to, I learned about like obviously the southern US being a little bit more agricultural, a bit more like, rural in some areas. And I had a fascination over it. And so I set on to finding more images about it. And I just found the images of Christenberry. There's this image that I think I maybe used it as a thumbnail. I'm not sure. That is this white and green car, if I'm not mistaken, in front of this house. And the house is kind of like falling apart. And there's like this huge, beautiful tree. And I just always was fascinated with the Gothic South. And so through my researches over the years, I had found these images. And then at some point, when I was working on the video about William Eggleston was actually good friends, allegedly, with William Christenbury. They lived close by. And I was sort of compelled to almost like, if I make a video about one, I should make a video about the other William. So I bought the book, and it was very interesting. I discovered that he did maquettes of his work, that he, did so much more than photography. And he never really wanted to photograph with anything else other than a Kodak Brownie.
Yeah, I know.
And just something so simple. And that was really an interesting point, because he said in I think in a book or in interviews that he just was interested in the memory of it. Like, he was not so interested in the equipment of it, in the making the photographs himself. He didn't care. He printed them in drugstores and whatever. Simple methods, but such a deep meaning. And I really love that about him. I think he's amazing, like, photographer.
How long? I'm thinking. I'm not judging, but I've asked this question of lots of people who have seen Ripley, and I know you love it. You made a film about Ripley, saying all photographers should watch it, and I entirely agree with you. How many sittings, though? I found myself just binging it like I've never binged before.
Yeah, I binged it, and I stopped sometimes, like, just to observe, like, and I'm like, wow, this is good. Yeah. So I think you would say I probably did 2 sittings, because technically I did one before the video, and then I was like, oh, this is great, I should make a video about this. And then I did one during the video, because I had to, in order to build your quote unquote argument or your logic, you have to be able to compile evidence. So I had to go back and rewatch certain scenes, and even the bit where I talked about Caravaggio and the influence. So I had to go back and watch that episode, watch that scene, contextualize it, so I was able, to make more sense. And I really do think that, obviously, that all photographers should watch. It's almost like it's a YouTube title, really. I mean,
well, it is, but I broadly agreed with you, and I was thinking, well, I think Tatiana's right here. Every photographer should watch it, and while we're about it, I don't think it was actually made for the public. I think it was just made for photographers.
I think it was made for honestly, it was made for the sheer beauty of art, and it was for people that appreciate it. Like, I just remember that so many friends of mine that I said, oh, you need to watch that, and they were like, yeah, I liked it. I think it was brilliant, but the pace and stuff, it was not, it was a little bit slow and whatever. But that's what made me think, because this is made by, like, for you to really indulge and appreciate, which is very interesting that Netflix would actually help produce, or maybe, even stream something like that, which is so different from their regular, products, which I think is great. I mean, it shows like that we're perhaps opening up to more mainstream channels having more artistic, I would say, movies or series or whatever. And I think that's great. And that show is really beautiful.
Oh, in terms of the pace as well, I likened it to, look, if you spend an afternoon in a gallery showing the best black and white pictures you could see on a wall, that's what it felt like. Don't go in thinking you're going to walk around the room and come out being McDonald's in half an hour. You're in there. You're in there for the afternoon, the evening, and possibly an overnighter as well. That I just felt that's what the pace. I think the pace was perfect. The
pace suited as well the place. I mean, that's sort of like, it's almost like you felt you were spending a summer in Italy, and you're just indulging in the landscape, and you're just strolling around, and I really think that came across quite well. I think it really suited the narrative. It suited like everything.
I've got a long flight coming up, and I've decided that is my companion for the entire flight.
There you go.
I don't like long flights. I don't do long flights very well. But I think even if I'm sat in the middle, near the back, where it moves around the most horribly, I could do this
relate
film.
totally. I
could
hate
do that
it.
film.
And I always take something with me as well to watch.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to be. Yeah, that's my companion. I think your book, Changing Light. We talked about it right near the start, and I do want to mention it. It's a lovely idea. A travel diary across 3 years. think what a super idea, because you feel you can learn through it. You get to know you get to see pictures. Was that your intention, this diary approach to it?
Yeah, it was totally my intention. Majority of it was actually just based on the notes that I had taken when I, was traveling, and based, of course, on my memories as well of what it was being there. But it really was like, I love the idea of journaling. I think it's super important. I think it's a tool that I really didn't appreciate for many years until I started to introduce that in my life generally. And then I was like, but this has a use as well to creative stuff. I mean, talk about ideas, but also like, today I remember I would write like, today I photographed this photo. I'm not sure if it's going to go well, but the light is this side and the other. And I really want to convey this idea, and I hope I do convey. So reading that 3 years later and looking at the photo and thinking it worked or it didn't, or reflecting upon what was Tatiana 3 years back. It's really interesting. It's something that I would love to really continue and just keep it up. Also, what it is, because I feel like there's a lot of pressure for photographers to put things out there that are like beautiful, that are of a certain standard. And I feel like I wanted to do something that wanted to touch on, yes, it, beautiful, but also like, it's just something a bit more of a sketch. And I wanted to touch on that. And I wanted to create something that was just like more intimate in a way that, I could also do what I love doing, which is talking about experiences and what I've learned and what can you learn, maybe, without obviously trying to sound like, oh, I can teach you a lot. No, maybe I can't, but at least just speaking on my experience, and hopefully people liked it, and it showed them that it's okay to just put something out there, that it's not like that big thing, that big volume, that big magnus opus, like that you have to be preparing for 20 years of your time. Just do it. And it's all a step within your learning curve. And definitely changing light was a big step, because I'd, had no experience of like making a book like that. And even though it was such a small run and etc., it was just interesting and valuable experience to learn how to do it for the future.
You can still buy it. It's now a digital copy, of course. But I love this idea of imperfection. I heard a saying, and I'm going to get it wrong. What was it? Everything's wonderful, but nobody's happy. I can't remember. I don't know who said it. I heard it recently. A videographer who I was working with said it to me. It was something like, everything's wonderful, but nobody's happy. So I like this idea of embracing imperfection. It doesn't have to be perfect.
I think perfect doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Perfection is unattainable, because perfection is just a concept that it's abstract. You can find something perfect, but it's not absolute perfection, because I might look at it and think it's not perfect. So what you think it's perfect now, in 3 years' time or 4 years' time or 10 years' time, you're going to look at it and find little things that you probably would change now with who you are now.
You mentioned, and it's played perfectly into my final question, mentioned Tarantino, and he said, or within the film you say, you need to know your why, it's an important part of the creative process. And just by chance, that's exactly how I end every single interview. So I'm going to ask you, since you said Tarantino had suggested it to us that we should know our why, what's your why?
I think why is because I believe that I have things to say, that I believe that the greatest thing you can do as a human being really is not how much you can have in life or how much you can conquer in life, but more so the impression you leave behind and how many people you truly help. It's interesting because I read a book not that long ago, and it talked about there being two deaths. A death that is physical and a death that is metaphorical. So in the death that is metaphorical is what everyone more or less tries their life trying to achieve. And it touches on like what you can conquer, what you can have, what's your legacy. So it's connected to legacy. Now, that put in perspective quite recently why I do the things I do, not because I want my metaphorical death to be connected to material things, but more so what is immaterial. I want to be able to leave one day and know that whatever my life ended up being, at least at this precise moment in time, for instance, that I'm creating things and I'm putting things out there that are contributing positively to the creative people in this world, or more, So I think that's why I do the things I do.
My thanks to Tatiana Hopper. It was a real delight to talk with Tatiana, certainly after having watched so many of her films. It's very strange for me, that is, when I interview studio guests. They're often sitting in the place where, if not all their video, but part of their videos are recorded. I always find that quite strange. I remember going to Sean Tucker's house for the first time when he was living in London, and we were sat down having a cup of tea, very English, and I looked around the room and I thought, we are practically sitting in a film set. Pups, come out of there, please. That's so muddy. Don't do this to me. Shower for one. That's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 96 is waiting for you. I wasn't sure what to call it, as it's a letters show in many respects, but there's a bit more Clinch and Hopper, which sounds like some kind of 80s detective show, doesn't it? Clinch and Hopper. Now on BBC One, Clinch and Hopper. Yes, there we go. Put that one together. There's an idea. But here's a taster of what's to come.
On this week's Extra Mile.
I love pictures. I love looking at pictures. I love thinking how I do it. I love thinking how I could improve it. It gives me ideas. It makes me happy. It makes me cross. It can make me quite cross these days. But I love photographs.
I'm sick and tired of the gatekeeping that exists within everything. You go to an exhibition and you have like 3 or 4 paragraphs, and the first paragraph is where this person was born, what did they do more significantly, and then the 2 other paragraphs are just rambling on about things you don't even understand because you haven't seen an image, and when you see an image you see something that is not there, that is not what they said. So I'll use another example. When you're tasting a wine and people tell you, can you notice the peach flavors and this flavor and that flavor, and you're just like, no, it's wine.
You mentioned earlier talking about mental health, about one's mental health. And I think the great thing is that you can make yourself really happy by taking a really nice picture.
So Tim Clinch, a guest from a few weeks back, and a little more from Tatiana Hopper, plus actually some more in terms of how we use social media as well from the mailbag. Quite a busy Extra Mile, which you will find on our Patreon channel. If you'd like to join our community and support the show. And as I say at the start of the shows each week, I'm so genuinely privileged to have a wonderful community support the show. Without you, this would just not, well, it might be here, but it certainly wouldn't be here quite like it is. So, and as frequently as it is. So thank you, sincerely. I mean that, for your support. And you can find out how to support the show by going to photowalk.show, the website. Top right-hand corner, that orangey yellowy button called Support the Show will take you to a page where you can learn more about it. So, our PS to the show is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song. Just to make some final frames to, or think about what's been said today. And it is from, as I promised, and Alan Sorensen had provided a link for, Andrew Peterson, who has some wise words, particularly pertinent when you consider that we never shy from talking about mental health on this show, and just how special, and you heard Tim Clinch mention it a moment ago actually, just how special it can be to be out there celebrating the quiet, or actually being in the urban landscape, but making a picture or 3. It's just about the best tonic, I think.
You got all that emotion that's heaving like an ocean, and you're drowning in a deep, dark well. I can hear it in your voice that if you only had a choice, you would rather be anyone else. I love you just the way that you are. I love the way you made your precious heart. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. I know it's hard to hear it when that anger in your spirit is pointed like an arrow at your chest. When the voices in your mind are anything but kind, and you can't believe your father knows best. I love you just the way that you are. I love the way he's shaping your heart. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Well, how does it end when the war that you're in is just you against you against you? Gotta learn to love, learn to love, learn to love your enemies too. You can't expect to be perfect, it's a fight you gotta forfeit. You belong to me, whatever you do. So lay down your weapon, darling, take a deep breath and believe that I love you. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Learn to love, learn to love, learn to love your enemies. Gotta learn to love, learn to love, learn to love your enemies too.
Be kind to yourself, from Andrew Peterson. A fabulous song. All right, shall we make another sketchbook? Tomorrow's going to be a really rainy day. Puppies, tomorrow's rainy. You haven't talked much today, have you? You haven't really earned your title to bark a lot. You know, tomorrow's walks might not be so much fun, Barney. It's rain, rain, rain and more rain, and then a bit more rain on top with some rain on the side. And for dessert, guess what? You guessed it, cloud. Let's make a final sketchbook. Back along the path, put your letters and things down there. Come here, pups. You've been a good boy today. Have you got anything to say? That's about it. Rattle your collar. I'm going to stoop down a bit lower, get a slightly different perspective. This is your perspective, Barnes. Life from a foot or so off the ground. Don't step on the letters. 3,500 shutter speed, 2.5, f2.5, 160 ISO. Sun's coming up nicely now, and there we go. I'll put my sketchbooks on the show today. Oh, look what you've done to the letters. Pups. Paw prints all over them. Thank you very much. Just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you've, or if you are or about to become an extra miler, if you've joined us. We'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world together, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we do, photographing and walking. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members. You'll need a postscript, a PS for the show. Today it's Langston Hughes. James Mercer Langston Hughes was an American poet, social activist, novelist, playwright and columnist from Joplin, Missouri, one of the earliest innovators of the literary art form called jazz poetry. Hughes is best known as a leader of the Harlem Renaissance, and I know of this one through Tatiana Hopper's YouTube channel, as it's a quote she uses as the introduction to her channel. I think it says everything about the wonder and power of art. Well, as much for that as it does for aspiration. So the PS today is this: hold fast to dreams. For if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.